My dear boys and girls, hope all of you are very fine today. Today we discuss about lesson 8 to 10. It is about the process of reflex action from chapter 5, coordination and secretion. So let's start. Boys and girls, listen to me very carefully. The mirror reflects light instantly when it receives the light. Reflex action is also like that. Reflex action is the consequences of immediate action of nerve impulse. So now the question is, what is nerve impulse? Any type of information in the form of electrical impulses flows through the nerve cell. It is called the nerve impulse. For example, when a mosquito sits on our hand, we drive it away, or when a pin pricks our hand or feet, we just withdraw our hand or feet immediately. Question is how it happens? And the answer is the presence of mosquito on the hand stimulates a sense organ. That means here the sense organ, it is our skin. This sensation travels from the sense organ to the spinal cord. We already mentioned that spinal cord, this is a part of central nervous system of human body. So this sensation travels from the sense organ to the spinal cord through the sensory nerve. Question is, what is sensory nerve? The nerve which doesn't follow your instruction. There are some nerves in our body which doesn't follow our instruction. They are called sensory nerve. In response, the central nervous system that sends back a message through the motor nerve. And then now the question is, what is motor nerve? The nerve that follow your instructions. It is called motor nerve, and that is the sensation from motor nerves to the muscles of the hand, and as a result we drive away or kill that mosquito. This is an example of reflex action. So the question is, what is reflex action? Reflex action occurs automatically, spontaneously, without conscious thought. It may be defined as the inborn automatic actions of the body which are done without the involvement of thinking or the involvement of the brain. Then look at here another topic, reflex arc. What is reflex arc? The reflex action are usually conveyed through spinal cord by a path. Reflex action are usually conveyed through spinal cord by a path. It is called reflex arc. The constituents of reflex arc are, first of all, it is the receptor organ, which is also called sensory organ. Number 2, sensory, that is the afferent nerve. Here it is afferent, AFFE, it means inward, that means towards the spinal cord. Interneurons, motor nerve, that is the efferent nerve, EFFE, EFE, that means outward. Outward from where? Outward from the spinal cord to the effectors organ. And this pathway, it is a reflex arc, and these are the constituents of reflex arc. Then reflex arc, look at here, there is an incident here. This is the candlelight, flame of fire, and this is the hand. Immediately after the pin pricks the skin of our hand, or the thermal heat, the sensory organ, that is the receptor organ, look at here, this stimuli, this is about the thermal painful stimuli. So the sensory organ, the receptor organ perceives this thermal painful stimuli. This painful stimuli passes into the spinal cord through sensory or spinal nerves. Look at here, this thermal painful stimuli passes towards the spinal cord through the nerves, and these nerves, it is sensory in nature. I already mentioned that what is sensory, the nerve which doesn't follow your instructions. Then these stimuli transport towards the center, towards the spinal cord through interneurons, neurons to at last spinal cord. It is called interneurons. So look at here, interneurons transmit the impulse from afferent neurons to spinal cord. Afferent neuron, that means towards the spinal cord. Fe means towards. Then the efferent neurons, that means the neurons which transmit the stimuli from the spinal cord. So the efferent neurons, that is the motor nerve, carries the message from the spinal cord to the muscle of this hand. The effector organ, that means when this hand receives the thermal painful stimuli, then this hand, it is the receptor organ. And withdrawing of this hand, this event, in that case, this hand again, in the second event, again it acts as the effector organ. So the effector organ shows a response to the stimuli. Which stimuli? The stimuli which comes from the spinal cord. That is the withdrawing stimuli, withdrawing of the hand. So the effector organ shows response to the stimuli, and consequently muscle contracts. This muscle contracts and we withdraw our hand from the painful stimuli. So again, look at the picture. The total event, thermal painful stimuli received by the skin of hand. Here skin acts as a sensory organ. Then from the skin, that is from this part, this stimuli goes towards the spinal cord through the neurons, and these neurons, they are called sensory neurons. They are also called afferent neurons because this neuron carries the stimuli towards the spinal cord. This is why it is called sensory neuron. And this thermal painful stimuli goes towards the, or at last received by the spinal cord through interneurons. That means this stimuli goes towards the spinal cord through interneurons. After receiving this thermal painful stimuli, this spinal cord gives a signal to the muscle of hand, gives a signal to the muscle of this hand through the neurons, this blue color neuron, through the neurons. And this neuron carries the stimuli from the spinal cord. This is why these nerves, they are motor in nature. Their another name, efferent neuron. Effi means outward. That means from spinal cord to the muscle. And due to these stimuli, which is transmitted from the spinal cord to the muscles, we withdraw our hands due to contraction of muscles. And this is the sudden action, immediate action. And this action, it is done by the direct involvement of the spinal cord without conscious thought. without direct involvement of the brain. And this is why the action, that means withdrawing action of hand, immediate withdrawing action of this hand, it is called reflex action. And this reflex action is conveyed, or it is completed through this pathway. The pathway is at first receiving of stimuli, afferent neurons, that means interneurons, then spinal cord, then efferent neurons, then effector organ. This pathway, this pathway, the constituents of this pathway, it is called reflex arc. It is very important to realize that the following figure, this figure, is a greatly simplified picture of a reflex action. In a reflex action, first a sense organ is stimulated by a painful stimuli. Look at here, this is the sense organ. It is stimulated by a stimuli. By which stimuli? Biting stimuli, that means painful stimuli due to biting of this mosquito. Look at here. In a reflex action, first a sense organ is stimulated by a painful stimuli due to biting of mosquito. This sensation travels from the sense organ. This is the sense organ. This sensation travels from the sense organ to the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord. So this sensation travels towards the spinal cord through this neuron. So this sensation travels from the sense organ to the spinal cord through the afferent or sensory neurons or sensory nerve fibers. In response, the central nervous system, that means the spinal cord is a part of central nervous system. That means in response, the spinal cord of central nervous system sends a back message through the efferent or motor nerve fibers to the muscle of the organs of hand, and as a result the organ is withdrawn. Look at here, the skin, this is the receptor organ, this is the sensory nerve, this is the spinal cord, this is the motor nerve, and this the muscles of the hand, it is the effector organ. We already mentioned that this is the pathway of reflex action, and this pathway is called reflex arc. And look at here, apparently the simple reflex action is in fact very complex events. The nerve fibers conduct the impulses from the sensory side of a reflex arc to the brain, and other fibers conduct impulses from the brain to the opposite side of the spinal cord. These connections with the brain enable a person to be aware of certain spinal reflexes and, up to a point, exert control over them. Reflex action is a combined action or combined act. In absence of any of the 5 parts I already mentioned, that 5 parts, that means sensory receptor organ, sensory nerve, that is the afferent neuron, then spinal cord, then efferent neuron, that is the motor nerve, then the effector organ. So in absence of any of these 5 parts which makes the reflex action effective, it cannot work properly. And after completing the process of reflex action, a creative question for you. Look at here. While drawing the structural unit of nervous system of human body, a needle prick on the hand of Abir, it causes a sudden jerking away of the hand. First question is, what is nerve impulse? Then second question, what do you mean by reflex arc? Third question, why the above mentioned structural unit structural unit is different from any other cell? Explain. Analyze the process of action, sudden jerking away of the hand. Process of action mentioned in the last line of the step. And here it is a homework for you. What is nerve impulse? Write down some example of reflex action of human body and draw the label diagram of reflex arc of human body. After completing this homework, you have to submit this homework to your respective subject teacher during class time. So, my dear boys and girls, be fine, everybody. May Allah bless us all.